Hi everyone, my name is Sydney, and for my literature review this semester, I wanted to take the time to look more into privacy problems. And I really asked myself the question, can users and platforms manage and protect one's privacy? To begin with, I wanted to read a quote that stood out to me, and you'll see overall in my presentation, I kind of plucked some quotes that really made an impact on my research. So the first one here is, privacy is a multifaceted concept encompassing a number of specific issues. The term privacy is widely used to refer to a group of related rights that are accepted nationally and internationally. So although in certain cases my research was a little more broad, but it did cover a lot of different concepts. So the point being, we have a ton of evolving technology. If we look at just simply in the last few years, the technology we had pre-COVID to now, especially considering a lot of us taught in online environments or worked to move our coursework to online environments, it has increased tenfold. We've seen a drastic evolution here. We're kind of even going through a technology renaissance. Things even 20 years ago are completely different from what they were now. However, with all of these great technologies and these great platforms and way to roll out curriculum and communicate, collaborate, and create, we do have that increased concern regarding our online privacy. And unfortunately, oftentimes the more the user interacts with a platform or a company or a database, the more likely their personal information is going to be scattered online and possibly violated. A concept that I related to often in my literature review that supported many of my sources was the idea of warm versus cold affordances. We kind of touched on this at the very beginning of the semester, but really a warm affordance is really not necessarily thinking drastically or feeling like you're being violated, whether you're participating in a social media platform or in an online environment. And this could include, choosing a picture to post or commenting on a friend's post on a social media platform. There's really no violation or distrust going on there. However, we run into issues when we talk about cold affordances, and this is kind of where we should be worried, or we should be considering, maybe making a change or taking action to protect ourselves a little more, because these cold affordances can really challenge or violate our privacy. And a lot of times we see these in those lengthy terms and conditions or the lengthy privacy policies that a lot of us did talk about at the beginning of the semester. When looking more into my research and trying to figure out why is privacy such an issue, does it root in can it be honed in on a specific reason as to why it's such an issue or why it's such a concern, I did take a look at a lot of different privacy policies, and I found a research article too that mentioned that only about 1 in 5 adults overall say that they always or often read a company's privacy policy before agreeing to it. And those numbers were kind of earth-shattering to me, although I'm really not surprised. But only about some of the 38% of all adults maintain that they sometimes read each policy, and 36% say that they've never read a company's privacy policy before agreeing to it. So when looking at, some of those statistics there and looking at some of the lengthy privacy policies, and I know being enrolled in many platforms and being a member or, having accounts on a wide variety of social media sites, it is really important to kind of take that into consideration and then, think, is that why, I feel like my privacy is violated? Is there an issue there? So I really kind of took that and on the ground running and asked myself then, can users work to protect their data? And I think that although, I don't think that there's a 100% chance that we can immediately be saved from privacy violations or anything, there's never going to be a 100% chance. But my research, suggested, and a lot of the authors in my research suggested that privatizing accounts, really can limit who can view, share, and even comment on posts or posts that are published by certain users. You can also use two-factor authentication on platforms when it is available. And that just means that it just makes more accounts difficult to access by other users. So this is really kind of trying to combat those scammers. And also users can just generally take a more active approach. It's important that they understand what they're exposing themselves to when they participate on a platform. So, maybe in the future as we continue working, with technology and as it becomes more relevant and more part of our daily routines, maybe thinking of ways in which we can challenge these lengthy privacy policies or these terms of service to make them easier for adults and really users of all ages to use. Like I mentioned before, data and privacy breaches have really caused users to put less trust in companies and platforms. So obviously, if there's less trust, we're going to have more issues. And I feel like it's just kind of like a snowball effect where we have more and more and more and more problems as we go on. So obviously, users involved in data breaches are more likely to have lower levels of confidence in companies. They're not going to be confident in companies. They're not going to trust companies. You know, if I've been hacked or scammed before with this company, why would I put my trust in this company again? My privacy feels violated. So is there a way, you know, that companies can actually rebuild trust? And that obviously is dependent on the user, but, you know, companies can include user guidelines. They can ask users to grant permission for their user data. They can actually update applications to allow users ways in which they can protect their personal information within their account settings. We have seen some of this more recently with a lot of social media updates. You have many more options or in system preferences to kind of prioritize your privacy and kind of tailor it to what you want. Although again, it is not completely foolproof. We see this all the time. But companies are also looking to make use of user data, and if they are, choosing to use the user data, they have to be compliant with up-to-date privacy policies. At the end of the day, if they're not up to date with those, then they're going to have issues. Companies can really also strengthen their terms and conditions, like I mentioned before. Just really showcasing that transparency, I think, will help build a lot of trust within those companies and within those users as well. One of the examples to support kind of that, fault in trust for my research, for my literature review, mentioned that, digital information is incredibly difficult to control and manage. And then there was actually a few years ago a Facebook and Cambridge Analytica privacy scandal, and that actually kind of resulted in roughly 87 million Facebook users' data being compromised. So that was a huge trust issue for some of those users. Again, not all of them, but it does take a little bit of time back to build that trust as, once our privacy is violated. When I was reading and looking more into policies and, different things, I kind of asked myself, why policies are so difficult to understand. And actually, for my research, a lot of Americans have just kind of point blankly acknowledged that they're not always adamant on reading or even paying attention to the privacy policies. We've seen that with the statistics that I had brought up before. But also Meyer, Schwell, and Kramer determined that users that read a shorter policy actually, so we're kind of problem solving here, did spend more time per word trying to understand the ins and outs of the policy's text because it was shorter. So here's, a huge way that we could probably problem solve and make these terms and conditions or privacy policies a little shorter. Meyer, Schwell, and Kramer's findings showed that more users were engaged in the shorter policies. So policy length, as long as making these policies user-friendly, maybe we're using the user-friendly language or language that's easier to comprehend for a wider variety of audiences, encourages users to be more inclined to actually read them and actually understand the problems or the context in which it's written. So I did, aside from the Meyer, Schwell, and Kramer, I actually looked at another study, and Fox and Royne examined and developed actually a scale to measure consumers' understanding of the different privacy policies. And that was called the Consumers' Understanding of Social Media Privacy Policies, like CUSPs. And another study that they did highlighted and examined the influence of the particular cues used in privacy policies and how this actually correlates with fear. So obviously, typically when we look at a privacy policy, it's extremely long, it's very wordy, it's not engaging. Now we know that it's not necessarily a picture book, right? But there are certain things that probably could be done to lessen the frustration or the confusion with privacy policies. And the first study that Fox and Royne kind of dove into, and they noted how difficult privacy policies were for user to read and let alone understand. And companies can certainly take advantage of this. They can take advantage of users by just kind of, they're just going to scroll through and accept anyways. So the use of different cues in privacy policies actually can assist users to better understand them and to what will happen with their information and like their data down the road as they choose to accept and use their, their platform or their site or whatever. And then study 2 that they did actually kind of furthered those former thoughts regarding those cues. And they actually revealed that audio presentation cues actually instilled more fear in the users, where visual cues or, like images or graphs or charts or some sort of visual within the privacy policies actually created a general increase in understanding of a social media privacy policy. So I found that was actually really interesting as well. I also looked into federal legislation or protection surrounding privacy policies. A lot of us know about COPA and, tailored to younger users, but we don't really see a lot of this same type of federal legislation protecting adolescent or adult users when we're participating in online platforms like this. So the reason being is because a lot of adults, are really split, and this is caused a lot of limitations within my research, is just because some people are like, there's no one approach that's going to work and solve all privacy problems. Some people think that some platforms should always ask for consent prior to using. So it's really just kind of like split in 10 different directions, which makes it really, really difficult to kind of create a common law or a development that would be sort of an umbrella term for everything. As far as concluding thoughts regarding my literature review, there's really no guarantee that privacy can be really fully protected 100% of the time. Users should know that, when they're participating on platforms or they have that digital footprint, whether they're participating, they're commenting, they're surfing the web, right? They're paying for something online. They always should know that that comes with a risk. There's always scammers out there, people with unfortunately not great intentions. But users do have options, although they may not be able to eliminate that altogether. They do have options to strengthen protections themselves, and companies can support them in doing that, as long as we continue to advocate for that need. Companies can make their privacy policies more transparent, they can make it more manageable for users, and just generally communication and education on the topic is key as our technology continues to progress and continues to be more relevant in our world. I have included all of my references on this slide deck, and so if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check them out. Thanks for listening.